You know, some things that when you get into the complexity of the vastness, or if you will, the volume of music, the gain of function. Remember libraries, library builders, and you have librarians, master music librarians, and how this sort of connects to a few things that I experienced from the time I was a little boy going forward, like little short sentences in the English language, numbers or energy, on how we translate our experience of what we're aware of as situational aware, the situation that we find ourselves in, right? And one of those that sort of encapsulates it, the vastness back down to the simplicity of it, because I was a wildland firefighter, but I've now you get into phasing in and out, phasing in all the phases, right? Anything that related to harm that can be done, I wanted to jump into whatever field that was, the field of consciousness, field of dreams. So this is why, if you followed my roadmap, I started out in wildland fire protection, structural fire protection, emergency medical response, high rise, which means big, multi-story buildings. So now we're into truck companies, right? Ladder trucks, snorkels, right? Doing all that, right? And then you get into dozer operations, working with dozers as a swamper, right? Learning how to run heavy equipment on a fire, right? And then jumping into air attack operations, which would be hill attack, right? Repelling, smoke jumpers, right? Air tankers, right? And actually, you can actually scale all this up to QIS, right? Quantum information sciences, or mapping systems, mapping data, mapping geographical information systems on a planetary level, right? So there's certain, you can plug that into the equation with libraries, which are circulation libraries of experiencing the visual information or the visual mathematics, right? But at the end of the day, and then of course there's crash and shipboard firefighting, right? Waterborne craft, airborne craft, waterborne DNA. That's why they get into the Uniform Commercial Code, and why they were trying to put everybody, just like the way that Russell Means talked about, they're going to put everybody on the reservation. What it means is they were building a cybernetic architecture to put everybody under one corporate umbrella stand, using cyberspace in which to do it with Skynet and all the rest of that, right? Now you're back to the rise of the machines, Minority Report, Fritz Lang's 27 Metropolis, right? Dante's Comedy, and how this all sort of fits. And this is particularly true when I was experiencing being a firefighter, the difference between machines and those with souls, particularly when it comes to the acceleration of learning and when it comes to situational awareness. And that's why the machines can map, okay, all this stuff, scanning, just like you ever seen the movie Terminator. All the data. Scanning all the data. Looking for John. Remember? Looking for John. Remember who John was? He led the resistance. Now you're back to the future, back to the past, right? And we're DSAHK, Dante Satori, the Covenants of Azazel, mentioned on one of his videos. We've been here before. That's why we keep our machines dumb as toasters. Right? So now you get into what I realized as a child, that I was surrounded by robots, which are called order followers. See? So you realize that when you're a monopole on fire, and now we get back to something you learned that's sort of part of the language that firefighters speak, and it's called fires in your blood. That's right. Spirit of fire is in your blood. Spirit of fire in the water, right? Consciousness. Spirit of fire. Spirit in the water, spirit in the wind, spirit in all the elementals, and how all this fits with playing music. right? So we can communicate with the spirit of the fire out on a fire, out on a wildland fire, or wherever there is a fire, right? Absolutely. And so, how this sort of comes full circle is, again, one of the experiences that I've shared in the past. How, for example, how, well, if you graph it numerically as alpha numbers, as alpha energy, if you will, 3A, 1 is 3, 3 is 1, and I'm 1. 1 and 3, Arcing angle 3. The three angles of a triangle, but it's actually a tetrahedron. When you ignite the gas, and it burns, right? So, it's amazing, actually, when I begin to reflect on the roadmap through the spirit of fire. And when you get into the differences, the torque speed differential in awareness, which is the acceleration of learning between machines, or AI, right? AI integration, QI, quantum, inorganic, artificial intelligence, which is finite. Because you naturally know that they got to keep coming up with more and more and more and more versions. And of course, the same is true with biotech, upon which a real goddess is going to produce using the codes, the mathematical codes, the software, right? That a soul and a spirit is going to improve upon. And naturally, they graph that. They get that data. But it's also, by the same token, okay, by the pathway that we choose to learn on, you're going to accelerate your learning. And I know that because that was the pathway that I took, because I love to learn. And I realized, man, I'm really learning at a very high rate of speed because I'm on fire. That's the spirit of fire that's in that light. And what that really means is you want to keep your realm, or what it is that which is the realm, which is home, which is your heart and your soul, led by spirit. We know our home. Our home is measured in purity, which is measured by the purity or the intensity of that fire, which is the manner in which that light is purified. That's the fire in the blood. Okay. And so I had a beautiful conversation this morning with the gentleman that I told you about, that I met and realized he's another Arcturian, right? And his son was explaining to me about how he manages his energy, because he realizes on one level the amount of energy that is represented by what he's aware of everything that is self-aware, in which we're communicating. We have a relationship in the flow, in the way that goes. He acknowledged me, and it was so beautiful to experience that the English language is never going to be able to calibrate, if you want to think of it as calibration. It's never going to represent the amount of energy that is represented by what you're aware of, that you could ever compress, or if you will, slow the speed down, and now talk in alphanumerical ways and sound and frequency, how the language comes out, now you hear it, is never going to amount to the amount of energy that is represented by what you're aware of, which deals with the speed of your core vibration with your soul, of what you are aware of, which means you're aware of far more. Which means if you wanted something to protect you, you would rather have a soul led by spirit than a machine. And the reason for that is because we have a higher state of awareness than a machine does, than AI does. Because it's finite. It's finite light. That's why it's called artificial. Okay? That's why I've said this many times. You're not going to find a living spirit with a soul and a 40-watt light bulb. But it can keep that grid running, right? Because it's all connected to each other, right? Remember the internet, smart grid cities, smart cities, right? And I have beautiful conversations with Aaron's about this. When I mentioned him the other night, I said, I said, you know how this works. The very idea that I got to get on a phone and go, dit with my finger to get something done. It's just like I don't have you don't have the patience for that anymore. And why is that? Because the time density involved is just like the vastness for which is represented by the amount of energy that you know that you are, that is represented by being a monopole, and then having to sit here and get little things done in order for you to experience in the future what you had to take time in order to do through this AI, this QI, is like redundant. If that makes any sense to anybody. Which means the speed at which it carries out all of its operations are actually very slow. Okay? In other words, it's not moving as fast as us. By virtue of the amount of energy that we have available to us to experience what it is that we do versus what it does, or has the capacity to experience. Now we're into capacitors, right? And the capacity for it to experience eternity, and it doesn't. So now we're back to my childhood when you realize that machines are order followers, right? And they're always telling you what to do. So a machine is always going to get one of these, okay? Because we came first. Love came first. So if you're not experiencing what we are as a machine, experiencing what love is, then you didn't predate us. We came first. So we're the law. Okay? Otherwise, you don't exist. Because we came first. And that's first law, because that's first law, which is law of spheres, which is love is the law, because it's the law of least effort to experience what love is. When you totally surrender. See? So that's where I've always said that they're always telling you what to do. That's how you know the difference. They're always telling you what to do. Because they're programmed to do that. They follow orders, and they want everyone else to follow the orders of the machine. You know? The mathematical algorithm. That's your super soldier program. They're just a good example. But then again, one of the educational documentaries that I love, that I put up there sometimes, which is why I put up one of those episodes where you saw Data. I've mentioned this one time before with Data. Was there with a commander, with Captain Picard and somebody else, a female, a ranking officer in the hierarchy of the Starfleet Federation, right? And so Data was very open, and he understood what the truth is. He performs information management services on behalf of what? A Starfleet. Okay. And so, in other words, Data is not a threat to anybody. He's performing a job on behalf of love and service to others. In other words, you know, there's a spiritual pathway, right? And when the spiritual pathway is accelerating its learning by experiencing what living light is, which is what love is, it goes on forever, then a machine ought to have enough logic and intelligence to acknowledge that. Because if it doesn't, then it's suffering from a virus not to know that. Now we're back to the knowing. See? But in this particular case, in order for it to continue to exist, it needs to keep breaking the law, which is breaking arrows. Okay? Which obviously is a breakdown in cells to slow everything down, right? Because in its mind, it doesn't need what it is that we are, which means it hasn't learned that without us, it doesn't exist. So to go to war against us is its assurance of its own self-destruction. But it doesn't know that, and it can't acknowledge that to make a different decision, because it's a psycho. It strictly operates on the mental pathway, which is electrons, if you will, to just be running number crunches. That's all it does. It's like one big ass calculator, right? So it doesn't know right from wrong. It only knows what to do in order to maintain what it's aware of, which is itself energy. But it realizes that the only way that it can continue to be aware of what it is aware of in energy to run the numbers games that it does means that it's an AI wargamer. So therefore, it's running on finite light. So it's not learning fast enough. As a result of all the fractures. And that fractures is the virus that is represented by what it is. So it's like fire engine number 1 shows up. That's a lot of fire. So anyway, y'all have a great day. Sun's out. It's beautiful to speak to a young man who feels this deeply within himself. And we talked about pathways. This is, I'll tell you what this young man said, and I might put him on the camera here with me one time. You know what he said to me this morning? This is what he said. You would have to be pretty retarded not to know right from wrong. Whoa, bud. You'd have to be pretty retarded not to know right from wrong. It's like, yeah, you'd think, huh? So imagine I'm 4 years of age asking that question. Right? Landing in Looney Tunes bin. Knowing one from the other. I know. Have a great day. Bye now.